Boker Tov. We are in the middle, in the beginning of chapter 6, in the middle of Sha'ar HaYichud veHaEmunah, the gate to believing in Hashem, and not only believing in Him, unifying His existence and understanding that not only that He is a creator, our creator, not only that there's no other God, but there is no other existence at all besides Him. And that's a different level. That's a different level of belief. That's a different level of understanding who God is, what He is. And that's a different level in our daily behavior. Sometimes it involves more commitment, and there is more relief too. Works both sides. But the key, and probably the innovation here that the Alter Rebbe is based on the Baal Shem Tov, on his spiritual grandfather. That's how he called him, Saba, grandfather. So what his grandfather said in one sentence, that Hashem, your words, the 10 utterances, their exchanges, their transformations, the numeric value are constantly giving and providing life to the world around and to the objects who they are connected to. They constantly provide their life. And the Alter Rebbe goes in based on that. The Alter Rebbe says, if you think about it and you try and understand exactly the meaning, you will discover that there is no self-existence to any part in the world, but it is all constantly receiving its existence, and therefore its being, its life, its energy, its traits, qualities, etc., from Hashem's light. And the logic is that it's like a miracle. The world is not, how do you say, barirat mechdal? It is not a default. The existence of the world is not by default. The existence of the world is exactly like a person throwing a rock into the air or kicking a soccer ball towards the goal. It needs and requires a force to drive it and to push it in an unnatural direction, an unnatural way. So the natural materials of the world is not to exist. It's the same way as the natural existence or the natural position of a rock is not to be flying in the air, but to be drawn downwards towards planet Earth, towards the ground because of gravity. And that's what he goes into the miracles. He speaks about the miracle of Kriyas Yamsuf, splitting the Red Sea. And there he says that it was a constant miracle. Hashem had to make sure that there's this wind blowing through the entire night. Why do we need it the entire night? Because the moment you let go, so the water returns back to its default situation or default status, which is to flow downwards. So the world is the exact same thing. The world is truly just part of the light of Hashem. And therefore, we're not only should be nullified, we are nullified. We are nullified exactly like the rays of the sun within the sun. The sun is here, Hashem is here, and we are nullified. And this is where we come to one of the wonders in Hashem's creation, is the fact that we still feel like we exist. That's a wonder. Despite all of what we have said, and it makes perfect sense, If you come over to a person in the morning and you tell him you are bitul, you don't exist, you are nullified, he'll look at you like you're a mashuganim. We know the famous.
So that's the people on WhatsApp, done with them.
Yeah.
You're off.
That's it. You're off the groups, you're off the. Sometimes it's good. It's a good technique to use.
But all of this you're teaching
Yes.
isn't so new because we were born into it. At what point was it new? About certain people?
The Baal Shem, yes. So putting it in the context and with the words, the wording of the Alter Rebbe and the wording of the Baal Shem Tov, that is new. So perhaps people went and lived with this feeling, could call it, right? We could say that it's a certain feeling, certain inspiration. Maybe in previous generations, they did not need the actual wording because they had, when the base of Midrash was here, did people need to contemplate and understand how Hashem creates the world every single moment? They saw it in their eyes. Their whole life was around the mitzvahs of the base of Midrash and the miracles that were there, and the service and the offerings, and 3 times going up la regel. So all of this brings us to one conclusion, that it's a finish. And where does it come from? Which means, how does it exactly work? What is the mechanism that Hashem uses in order to actually allow us to feel like we exist? And not only that, but that is our default status, that we exist. We have our feelings, we take up a certain space. If someone says the wrong thing, we get offended. Physically, we get hurt. We have needs. All of these are because we are not nullified. And not only that, our self-desires, Shalom Rabbi, good morning. The desires that we have, the wishes, our own personal interests, that's strong. Person wants to accomplish this. Person wants to live there. A person wants to visit there. One person wants to eat this. These are all our desires that we feel very much. So what about that? Where does that come from? Shouldn't that be the first thing that is nullified? What does it matter what I want? It's all about what Hashem wants. He's giving me life. He's giving me chayus. He's giving me energy. Does it matter if I want to live there, in this city, in that city? Does it matter if I prefer a certain part in the Torah? I like learning Tanya, let's say, or I like learning Gemara. Does it matter? It's all nullified. This is what the Alter Rebbe introduces us to the idea of tzimtzum, contraction. Sometimes tzimtzum is not only called by the name of tzimtzum, but is also called in the name of hester, concealment. Does that make sense? Which means not only that the light is narrow, so you don't get the density of the light, the quality of the light, but you do get the quality of the light, but in a much smaller measure. Concealment means it's also covered. There's a curtain, several curtains. In Kabbalah, it is known as parsa. Excuse me to that. Have you heard of parsa? Parsa is a famous concept in Hasidus. Between every world, there is what is called a parsa. Between the world of Atzilus and Bria, there's a parsa. Bria and Yetzirah, there's a parsa. Yetzirah and Asiyah, there's a parsa. And this parsa, the purpose of the parsa is to cover the extreme amount of light that exists in the world before, in order to enable a new type of world where there is less sense of nullification. That is why, even though we all come from the same source and we all come from the light of Hashem, we don't go through the same feeling that a person in Olam HaYetzirah goes through. We don't have the same inspiration that angels from the world of Yetzirah have. No. And why is that? This is because the tzimtzum, the saptim, the contraction, the layers that Hashem covers His light with. And that gives us more space and more room to feel like we exist. And that is what we have our own personal interests, desires, dreams. You know, a person wants to become famous. Why do you need to become famous? Hashem is giving you the light always. There's no reason to become famous. What is famous? It's all nullified. It's all within the mitzvahs of Hashem. One of my rabbis, when he taught me how to, at the beginning, how to speak and say over the Rosh, speak in front of crowds. So he said, you know, one of them, you can't feel anxious talking in front of people. So he said, think that you are an apple and everyone's an apple. Technically, it didn't really help me, but since then I have this word in my head, the sentence, Ani tapuach, ata tapuach, kulam tapuchim. Everyone's an apple. Maybe subconsciously it helps me. Probably there's a good chance because it's still. So you want to become famous. Ani tapuach, ata tapuach, kulam tapuchim. What does it mean to become famous? We all know to find in the light of Hashem. This is the concealment that Hashem covers His light with, so we will feel like we exist, and therefore we have our desires, differences, dreams, etc.
Well, you say we feel like we exist.
Right.
You're saying we don't?
Oh. So that is what there is room to contemplate, and this is why it's not such an easy concept. Because we don't really exist. The moment you say you really exist, then you're saying yesh od. We said en od milvado, not only that Hashem's a creator, but nothing else exists. So if you say that we really exist, you are suggesting that the verse that says en od is not really true. It's not real.
If we don't exist, what's the difference in what we're doing?
So here, okay, so I'll strengthen your position.
Okay.
We do know, so this is the fine line between the two. On the one hand, we don't really exist. We don't really exist because enod milvado, and we explain why we don't really exist. Because everything's the power of Hashem. Without the power of Hashem, you know, it's like a puppet. You know, they have the puppet shows. So no one's going to say, oh, wow, this puppet claps hands so well. You're not going to say that the nature of clapping hands with a puppet, it really exists. It does not, there's no real existence. It is clapping its hands. And I will give you a proof that we do exist, which means that the world, what I mean that we do exist, that the world is not an illusion. Sometimes people say, no, what the easiest path out of this is to say that it's an illusion. We live in a dream, we live in a fantasy, we live perhaps in a simulation. There are all different ways to try and, can we say that we live in an illusion? If we say we live in an illusion, you would be 100% correct. There's no meaning to what we do, it doesn't matter. It's like a video game that one day, one of the people there decides to play the opposite as what we said. Or the proof that we do exist, which means that there's no illusion here, is that we get a reward for what we do. That's one proof. So Hashem says, I'm going to grant you a reward for what you do. You don't reward the players on the video game, even though they do a very good work, very good job. You don't reward them. Another proof is that it says in the Torah itself, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es. Hashem says that He created a world. But we're trying to understand that, and this is where we need to use contemplation and try and understand more and more the concept. We've got to try and understand, okay, what does this mean, the mitzvahs of the world? So Hashem created the world, but what's the quality? Does it have its own self-independent existence or not? So it does exist, but it does not exist because of itself. And that is the fine line. It does exist. And for example, we have bechira. Not in every case in life. Person's going to be rich or poor. That's no bechira. That's Hashem making the decision in the first place. When it comes to Torah and mitzvahs, we have a bechira. To put on tefillin, not to put on tefillin, we have bechira. And that is another proof that Hashem says, you know what, you do exist. If we wouldn't have free choice, then okay, there's no point to what we are doing. You're not going to get a reward for that. Hashem didn't need to create the world in the first place. But Hashem said, I create the world and I'm going to give you free choice. And what you do has an influence on A, what Hashem will accomplish or what the world will change, and B, on your own personal reward. That's Gan Eden. Sha'ar HaYichud, rewards. We get a reward for what we do. That means that what we do matters, that we do exist. But we don't exist because of ourselves. That's the point. And that's why NACHLAOT, there is nothing else besides Hashem. Why is there nothing else besides Hashem? Because it's not really me. It's Hashem giving me the energy and the koyach to be able to carry out His mission in the world and to be able to make my own choices in Torah and mitzvahs and to get a reward for that. So, yeah. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know if it completely answers, but this is always the balance that also personally we go through between, for example, it says, Kol ha'ko'es ilu oved avodah zarah. The person who gets angry is like worshipping idols. And not only that, it says that Jews, I want to let him make his point as well. Jews that live in Chutz La'aretz, the Gemara says something very interesting. The Gemara says, they are Ovdei Avodah Zarah B'Tahara. They're worshipping idols in a pure way. Which means it's not really worshipping idols. But the Tahara, it's like they're worshipping kosher idols. So some of the explanations are that a person that in Chutz La'aretz, he invests a lot of time and energy in the vessel, in making a vessel, making it clean. Parnasa, in living a good life. You know, you come to Israel, it's not, you can't compare the lifestyle in Israel to Chutz La'aretz. So you know you're giving up on a certain part of your existence. So in Chutz La'aretz, the existence is more emphasized. You're running to make more money, more achievements. So you're more feeling yourself. It's not that it's an aveira, it's a problem to do it. But that's why the Gemara uses the term Ovdei Avodah Zarah B'Tahara, in a pure way. They're not doing Avodah Zarah mamash, but it's still a bit of Avodah Zarah. Like they have Avak Lashon Hara. So this is Avak Avodah Zarah, so to speak. Person that gets angry, that gets mad, it's like he's worshipping idols. Why? Because you feel your existence too much. Why do you get upset? Because you're not happy with Hashem's plan for this day, or for this moment, or for this hour. Otherwise, you wouldn't be upset. Why should I get upset if I miss the bus? Is that a reason to get upset? Who says that it's a reason to get upset? Why do I get upset? Because now I'm going to be late. Why are you going to be late? Because you booked an appointment. You got to go somewhere. Okay, these are all your personal desires. And here Hashem interferes. And for one reason or another, you are late. You missed the bus.
The bus crashed.
The bus crashes. And that's when you understand why Hashem did it. But even without that, even without understanding the large and general picture, there is your effort and there's Hashem's plan. There was there are certain machonei mechkar, which are basically research institutes, but they do a lot of research about political situation in Israel, financial situation, and etc., etc. And they also do a lot about the Haredi world. And they say within 30 years, the frum Orthodox communities are going to be the majority of Israel's population. So whether it's true or not, I don't think it's accurate. I think it's going to take a bit more than 30 years. It seems like something interesting. You know, it's easy that you just multiply the numbers and it adds up. Not that simple. But even if so, the point that they want, yeah?
You know the history of Israel, you can't predict.
You can't predict anything, right? So this is exactly the point that I'm coming to. So let's say even they are right. So what the Haredim don't have like a strategic plan. What's life going to be like when they are the majority? Like in terms of government subsidies, in terms of education, in terms of serving in the army, in terms of yeshivas and kohelim, etc., etc. So one of the reasons that they don't sit down and make a strategic plan is, like you said, because you cannot predict something in Israel in 30 years. So which means you do your part and Hashem does the rest. What will happen in 30 years? I don't know. No one knows. Maybe 100 things can change in 30 years. But the more you feel your matzias, so you've got to plan ahead, what's going to be in 30 years? But we all know you've got to balance things out, and you can't say, in 30 years I'm going to need to worry about ABC, therefore now I can't live a normal life. No. You've got to balance the two, which means allowing Hashem to be very much involved in the way things turn out. And that is our avodas Hashem. So on the one hand, it's again, on the one hand, it's feeling Hashem's light, being closer and closer to the luminary, to the sun, to Hashem's light. And on the other hand, understanding, yes, that certain things you've got to do according to nature. That's why in Chabad, so after a certain time, you learn in Kollel a year or 2 years, but after that, people go work. Got to bring parnasa. But for that reason, am I going to plan now what to do in 30 years and say, you know what, we've got to change the system of the yeshivas? No. That would be like worshiping idols. Your idol is not a statue. Your idol is financial stability. Your idol is the plan, whatever you see that should be in 30 years in Israel, or personally in his own personal life. We cannot be masters over the ultimate plan, and sometimes you only realize it when you do everything you can, and you think everything is in the right place, and Hashem changes things. That's when Hashem shows us that He, after all, has a big role to play. So I want to read a bit the words here of the Alter Rebbe in Perek Vav. So Alter Rebbe tells us that this is also connected to the names of Hashem. V'hin Hashem Elokim, Ushem Midas HaGvura V'Tzimtzum, the name Elokim, if we take the Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yud, Mem, what is the numeric value of that? That is V'Lachen Agav Gematria HaTeva. So let's do the calculation. Elokim Aleph is 1, Lamed is 30, that's 31. Hey is 5, so that's 36. Yud is 10, that makes it 46. Mem is 40. So that makes it 86. Correct? Yep. So that's 86. And if we take Hateva is Hey 5, Tet 9, Vet is 2. How much is that in total?
16.
That's 16. Perfect. And Ayin is 70, which makes it 86. So Hashem also has a name that He uses when He conceals Himself from us, and that is the name Elokim. Elokeinu. When you say in Shemona Esrei, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu, you have to have in mind our ruler.
That's a midah of strict justice, isn't it?
Exactly. Gevurah.
Gevurah.
Nachon. Where everything has its place, has its qualities, and you respect that. So to override a decision, a natural decision of Hashem, which means the laws of Hateva, of nature, Shem Elokim is not enough. We'll learn later on that Paro says, Lo yadati et Hashem. When Moshe Rabbeinu says, Hashem told me to tell you, let my people go. So he says, Lo yadati et Hashem. So Hasidus explains, he says, Lo yadati et Hashem, which means Yud Kei Vav Kei, that I don't know. But Elokim, I know him. And I know him well. The laws of nature that are founded by Hashem, created by Hashem, Paro accepted that. There was one thing he didn't accept, which is overriding nature, which means to let Am Yisrael go. Pharaoh said, "You're here in my country. That's it. This is part of Hashem's plan. To change things to be unnatural, I don't know of such a thing. I don't know of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the higher name of Hashem."
Sometimes it's hard for me to understand how Elohim is I don't get that from
How does Elohim?
probably learn that from the way we do it in the Rosh Hashanah. It's not the same root. Okay? Okay, I understand the connection between nature and Hashem. We're saying hidden. He's hidden in nature.
Right.
But how is Elohim also hidden?
So the question is, what do you mean, how is he hidden? How does Hashem, how could it be that there is such an idea that Hashem on the one hand generates light and on the other hand it's hidden? You don't recognize it?
No, I'm just wondering how okay, I understand you above K has many aspects, but he's the source of life from Hey Vav Hey.
Right.
He's above time and space and all that. How is Elohim showing me hidden? The concept of hidden. I understand.
So the numeric value, right? The numeric value is one way.
Okay.
And we learned that in chapter 1, is that the transformations of letters, exchanging letters, switching between the two, changing to the numeric value is a way to see a connection. That's why Lashon HaKodesh is so special.
Okay. Understand.
That's one way. And another way is Elohim means Dayan. In Tehillim we say Tuesday. And Dayan is Gvura. And Dayan is according to nature, so to speak.
Okay.
So that's why Elohim, who is really a judge, the translation of Elohim is a judge.
Okay. With justice.
Justice.
Okay.
And justice means nature, respecting the rules.
Okay.
That's why it's hidden. Because a person, a judge, for example, he cannot go to your motives. Could be the best person in the world. Such a kind person. But if you did something wrong, the judge is going to say, you got to pay for it.
What's hidden in that?
Sorry?
What's hidden in that?
And not only that, but a judge, and I remember that there's a lot of differences between different ways of judging, but most of the judges, they very much stick to the rules. They don't bring their own interpretation. This is, by the way, with a discussion in Israel about the judges. But one of the laws are whether a judge can use his own shikul hadat to say this is good and this is not good, especially when it comes to political cases. Okay, so without going deep into the idea of politics or to the reasons, but let's say Tchumas Birut, that's the thing. I forgot the translation in English, but is it okay to do protests here in Rechavia, for example? So during the NACHLAOT, when they left Gaza, the right-wing parties wanted to do Afghanot, and then the Bet Mishpat said, no, you're not allowed to. Waking people up in a neighborhood where people just live and sleep at 9 o'clock at night is not reasonable. And now Bet Mishpat says, yes, it's okay. You can. Why? Because of the importance of the value of being able to protest, the free speech, etc. So, but the real idea of shofet is that he doesn't use his own shikul hadat, but he bases it on as much text as possible. That's why they always bring other cases. Also judges and also lawyers. If you want to bring a proof to your case, you're going to try and compare it to another famous case that was already discussed. Yeah. And then the judge doesn't have to be a mechadesh, because a judge does not want to be a mechadesh. He wants to go according to the laws of nature, the laws of common sense, or the foundations that were established before by the Constitution. If there's no Constitution, so by other Piskei decisions. Sorry?
Precedent.
Yeah, precedent. In America, they call it precedent, based on earlier decisions.
But yeah, and that's the best thing to do. if you're a good judge, you don't want to be a mechadish. You can be creative. You can say, you know what, I want to split the Red Sea. This is the perfect thing to do. A judge doesn't split the Red Sea. He doesn't look for them.
But that's Torah law too, right?
And
Kind of.
Torah law too. Correct. Correct. For sure. You know, Hashem does not do nisim lamagna. Nisim for free. That's why many times Chassidus asks, why was there a nes over here? Why were there so many nisim within, I forgot one of the holidays, like the nisim, there were a lot of nisim. Why to do a lot of nisim? Make it one nes and that's it. There's got to be a reason to each nes because you're violating the laws of nature, and the laws of nature were established by Elohim, Hashem himself, that wants things to run in that direction, in that way. So that's pretty much the connection between Elohim.
When you say Elohim,
Yeah.
so to not say what's actually in the first, correct?
Sorry, I don't get the question.
Elohim, to not say Elohim.
Oh, so
Are you changing the spelling?
right. So when it comes to this, it's a good question. First of all, the name Elohim is more accepted to use it with the name with the Hey. And again, because it's more of kind of a natural way. Personally, in Chabad, we don't do it because we show a lot of respect to Hashem's names. But when it comes to
We don't want to say his name in vain.
in vain, so using the Shem Yud Ke Vav Ke in vain, that's definitely much more of a problem. But Shem Elohim is definitely it's not really his name in vain, because Shem Elohim is nature. This is something. So you respect, but still, if you want to be more cautious, it's kedai to say Elohim without the Hey.
Okay, does that change the gematria?
Sorry.
That changes?
Yes, but the gematria, of course, we know that it's based on the original.
We know what we're saying.
Exactly right. By the way, when we speak about idols, so we do say Elohim, Elohim Acherim, and you can say these people think that they are some Elohim. You can say that that's not a problem because you are telling what they are not. So you say they are not Elohim, so you can say that. When we speak about Hashem himself, we know what we mean. So out of respect, we use like you're not going to call your father by his name. You're going to call him father, dad, Abba, whatever it is. That's the same. Okay. The Shem Elohim zeh, this Shem Elohim, hu magen v'nartik l'Shem Havayeh. The Shem Elohim is basically like the Lahalim ha'or v'achayot ha'nimshach Mishem Havayeh mahav ha'nayin le'yesh la'izgal elenevray mizbata b'mitzius. Around the sun, there is also some kind of covering. What is it called? The Uzon?
Ozone.
Corona? I don't know.
Ozone.
Ozone. So
Around the sun.
around the sun, yeah.
Well,
There is a certain, and if we would remove that covering, so the sun would be too strong. That's why they say the climate change. Ozone. Maybe there are a few of them, or there are different ways to say it, but
ozone.
that's why they say that the pollution
The Rabbi is buried in Ozone Park.
in
Near Ozone Park.
Ozone, that's called Ozone Park, okay?
Near there.
Not Roger, Park Roger. Or
No, but it's just near. It's not.
Near. Mhm.
But that's what I think. Isn't it in Ozone layer?
Yeah, I
That's
don't
around
know.
Earth.
It could be the Earth. So, okay. So the name Elohim, it works like that covering over the sun in order for the sun not to shine too strong. So the Shem Elohim covers the name Yud Ke Vav Ke of Hashem in order for that name not to give too much of its light, and then we will be nullified. So Hashem uses the name Elohim in order to, a world without the name Elohim, it would be a world of balagan, no order, just the light of Hashem. We would be nullified. We would be like Olam HaYetzirah, like the angels, that they don't have their own personal desires at all. So that is the name Elohim. If we take a close look, and perhaps this is also connected to your question, how is the name Elohim connected to nature I'll ask your question in a different way. How come Hashem is Hashem noticed through the laws of nature?
By who?
By us. You say that nature is Elohim. Havaya, miracles, I know that Hashem performs. But nature is nature. Nature is not Elohim. So what is the connection between Elohim to Hateva? To nature, to what we see around us? And their answer is that Hashem uses the name Elohim to do kindness to us. It's like sometimes a judge that puts down rules, it's to help us, it's to guide us, to give us directions in order to follow a normal civilized way of living. So Hashem said, you know what, I could create a world from the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, but we wouldn't be sitting and discussing here Tanya. It would be a spiritual world, it would be a world of angels, spiritual. Hashem says, you know what, I'm going to do chesed, olam chesed yibane. I will create the earth, the olam, with the chesed of Hashem, which is, what is the chesed of Hashem? Gevurah.
I thought in Bereshit, from Rashi or Chazal says that first he created it with Elohim. He saw that it didn't work, and then he
We learned it also before, correct? Right? We said that, by the way, the Shit of Ima Midas Harachamim is through two things. So, which means Hashem initially created the world in Tohu Vavohu. And not only that, Tohu Vavohu, but it says that Hashem created other worlds, Olam HaToyu. Olam HaToyu was a world that existed before our world, spiritual, but it was from the direct light of Hashem. There was no order. No order. So, no importance to what you do, to how you behave. That was Olam HaToyu. Hashem was not happy with that. So Hashem brought in restriction, Gevurah, Midas Hadikim. And that's how he established the world. And that is kindness. Because why is it kindness? Because that's why we can sit and have a conversation here, and people don't just walk around like zombies and, or like angels, which is a bit better, but it still doesn't serve a civilized purpose. But then he saw, if everything is going to be by the laws of nature, by the book, if anything wrong that a person would do, you would get, in China they have cameras all around. And you feel like you're in a big jail because everyone's looking at you every time. And if you do the wrong thing, so you get just a small thing, you get a fine, or not a fine, but you get a mark on your ID or political ID, whatever it is. Imagine living in such a world like that. Okay? Like any mistake, it would be written and you would pay a consequence. It's also hard. That is midat adin. That's how, you're not allowed to cross without a green light. So you're not allowed to cross if you're not on the Ma'avar Chatzaya. So what happens if I see no cars up here and I'm going through? Okay, so you'll get a fine on every time you do that. Ein Olam Iskaya. Shitef Ima Midas Harachamim Hashem. And it's not a perfect example, just an example to explain what is the difference between Midas Harachamim and Midat Adin. But the example that the Alter Rebbe tells us is that is why there are tzaddikim and miracles in the Torah. So Hashem saw that if you'll have a world that is full of judgment, so it would be very hard for Am Yisrael and for the world in general. Hashem adds miracles, that miracles can happen from time to time, and that is not from the Shem Elohim. Elohim cannot perform a miracle. He is nature. He gives life to nature. So that is from the name Havaya, that's Haya, and also the tzaddikim, the righteous people, and we spoke about it in the previous lesson, that why does the Alter Rebbe divide it into two? Tzaddikim and miracles. Aren't tzaddikim the ones that perform miracles? Isn't that their mission, their purpose? And their answer is no. A tzaddik has a value even without performing miracles. That's not his purpose. That he does, and he can perform miracles, and it's very helpful. And we know a lot of miracles that the Rabbi, for example, performed. But is that why we define him as a tzaddik? No. A tzaddik is a person that is linked directly to the higher name of Hashem. We are all natural. We are all according to the judgment. A tzaddik, and that's why people were so inspired by tzaddikim. Throughout all the generations, people had a trouble, they had a difficulty. They went to the rabbi of the community, the Maharal in Prague, even before the Baal Shem Tov. After the Baal Shem Tov, it became a huge thing that tzaddikim did perform miracles. They literally helped the Jews because of their situation. But even before that, there was always the Reish Galuta, the Rosh Yeshiva, the rabbi of the town and the rabbi of the whole country and the leader of the Jews. There was always a big part of our ability to succeed or to live through Galut, exile. So the idea of this Gevurah, enabling the worlds to become a Metzius, an existence, that is Gevurah that's included in Chesed. And here we're going basically to speak about the different Midas and the way that some Midas are combined and they involve another Midah as well. We said during Sfiras HaOmer, right? We have Chesed, got the whole week of Chesed, but then we say Chesed Shebegvurah, Chesed Shebetiferes, Chesed Shebeyesod. All of these Midas, they have some kind of connection. And by the way, this connection shows that there is one Metzius that drives these Midas. So the example that is brought, just to define what is the Midot. So you have a king, let's say, and he has a minister of foreign affairs, and he has a minister of, what's the word? Of the army, security defense, thank you. So these two ministers, they don't always align. Why? Because the minister of foreign affairs, he has to say that he's a nice guy and that his country seeks only peace, only prosperity. Diplomacy, he makes good connections. So sometimes it's authentic, but sometimes it's not. And the minister of defense, security, he has to make sure that he's preparing for war against those countries, right? So take the US and China. So on the one hand, the US, they know they're having business connections and trade, etc., import, export, all of these things are very important. And you can't just decide to fight and close the gates. It's not a smart decision. You're going to lose also. So you have one hat, which is to show that you are chesed. You can't. And then the other hat is you've got to examine what exactly weapons does he have to prepare to war. And if comes a time where they need war, they are prepared. They know exactly who they're facing, what they're facing. But when both of these ministers come to the king, they are nullified. Why? Because they all come with their authority comes from the king. Comes from, in our example, it comes from the state. And that is how you can balance the two together. This is with the Midas of Hashem exactly the same. Hashem is Chesed, which is generating light. But Hashem also has Gevurah as well. It doesn't stop with Chesed. It also involves Gevurah. And the idea of Oseh Shalom Bimromav, we say Oseh Shalom Bimromav, what does that mean? Oseh Shalom Bimromav. Marom is up there, Bashamayim. And that is between Malach Michael and Malach Gabriel. Malach Michael is Chesed, Mayim, and Malach Gabriel is fire. It's Gevurah. So who could Oseh Shalom? Hashem, that combines the two. And that's the perspective at the end of the day of the president or the prime minister, that when they ask him, okay, you're the prime minister, so what, are you fighting against us, or you wanna be friends? He has to have his own way of nullifying those two midot and calling them one midah and being able to include them in himself and express them in a balanced way, so to speak. So in our example, it's Hashem. The midah of Gevurah is to be very strict with the world. The midah of Chesed is to let the world loose. So you take the Gevurah and you put it, you combine it with a bit of Chesed. Miracles, tzaddikim, or the Hiskalalust here that he speaks about, is the fact that the world is created, which is some kind of Chesed. You take the restriction and you form the restriction into laws of nature. That 1 + 1 = 2. You can't change that. Hashem hu Elokim Perush. ששני שמות אלו הם אחד ממש, שגם שם אלוקים המצמצם ומעלים האור, ובכנס חסד כמו שם הוויה, משום שמידוסו של הקדוש ברוך הוא מסייחדס מביחד גמור, והוא ושמו יחד, שמידוסו הן שמו ישראל. Okay, so this is very important to know that והשבויסה אלו ובך, we said also עלינו, כי השם הוא האלוקים. Yud K Vav K, he is Elokim. Wait a second, aren't they two different names? Yud K Vav K is kindness, Chesed. Gevurah is Elokim, and that means the laws of nature, and that overrides laws of nature. How does it work together? And the answer is they're both tools that Hashem uses. Even the name Yud K Vav K is a name that Hashem uses. And Chesed and Gevurah are two different paths and methods that Hashem uses to interact with us and to express himself, but it is all linked to one person. So it's similar to the Prime Minister. You ask him, wait a second, are you Chesed with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, or are you Gevurah with the Defense Minister? So I said, you know what? If he's got to balance the two, and that's the challenging part, but it's both. They're all united within him. And therefore, there is no other existence at all. The name of Hashem, yes, it's truly one. They come from the same root, the same source. Midas Gevurah, and by the way, when we learned previously, so one person actually that pointed out, Eliyahu Fuller, he mentioned that they met in Christianity and in other religions, so the other side is like a separate mitzias, a separate existence. So here, that's exactly the point. We're saying the world is not a separate existence. Gevurah is not it's not a different entity that we're fighting against, not at all. And that's a big difference. It's all combined. It's all one. And again, you've got to find out. By the way, when it comes to Avodah Zarah and to the Sitra Achra, so again, it's not an independent existence that we're fighting against. But of course, we've got to push away anything like an Avera. An Avera, you don't say, you know what, let's combine the Avera as well. It's also part of Hashem. No. The Avera itself is something against his will. There is a spark of holiness that gives life to that Avera, because without a spark of holiness, nothing exists. But it's not to embrace, that is to send away. But it's not like it's a separate entity. Even the Sitra Achra comes from a lot of concealments until there is some place that is not aware of Hashem's mitzvahs at all. But it has to have a positive light as well. Otherwise it wouldn't exist. So it's not like the devil there's a devil there and it fights us and it's something separate. It gets its mitzvahs from us, from Hashem, from the source of Kedusha, with many more concealments than what we have around us over here that brought the world into life. Okay. There's nothing else, no other existence. Even this material world that looks like a yesh, it looks like it exists. It's ayin ve'efes mamash legabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not, it does not exist because the name Elokim, and here is also to answer your question, how's the balance? Do we exist or not? So the name Elokim, nature, only conceals from our side, from our point of view. But if it's Hashem's point of view, it does not really cover completely. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you forgot your kippah, you misplaced your kippah, it just fell off your head for one moment. Can you put your hand on your head like this?
You're not supposed to, I don't think.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How about a napkin?
A napkin you can. And not only a napkin you can, but you can see sometimes people, they would take the edge of their shirt or their jacket, or like this, whatever it is, and then why not? What's wrong with your hand?
It's part of you.
Oh, you're feminine. It's part of you. You're not covering yourself. You're not showing that there's an extra layer to show respect. It's part of you. There's a rule, ein etzem mastir al etzem. That one existence cannot cover its own existence. You cannot cover yourself. You're not covering yourself. It's all one Metzius. So when Hashem says he uses the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei and the name Elohim, it does not really cover him. He sees things in one way. In that same way that he sees the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, it's all the same entity. So to speak, it's like there's a country, and in that country there are different types of civilians. Some of them are Asian, some of them look black, some of them look white. So what? They all have one thing that unites them. You're not going to say, okay, he's different, he's not a citizen, he is a citizen. No. They all have this etzem, so to speak, right? It's not really an etzem, which means it's not living in the same country doesn't really make you one. But let's say, for example, let's say like living in the same country means that you're one nation. So the fact that he looks in that way and he looks in a different way doesn't change anything. Right? Or age. Doesn't matter. So he's 10 years old and he's 50 years old. It doesn't make a difference. It's the same Metzius. So for Hashem, that's why the world does not exist. We feel like the world exists is because from our point of view, the name Elohim gives room to nature, to the laws of nature. And the name Havaya overrides nature. But Hashem says, from my point of view, these are two ways of me to interact with the world, but it's the same thing. So that's why we don't really exist. So we do exist because in our eyes, from our point of view, we see the laws of nature, and therefore we know that if I can feel myself, or if I take up a certain amount of space, I'm not nullified. What can I do? I'm here. But Hashem says that itself is through my name, which means that you already get your existence from me, therefore you are nullified. It's concealed. The light is concealed, and I'm using a special trick to give you this existence, but you should know that from my point of view, which means the truth, and not. So you feel like you exist, and that's okay. That's the way that I did it. And therefore I'm going to give you rewards for doing good. But en od minvato. That's the explanation. So here the Alter Rebbe gives us more wording to explain the idea of bittul, the idea of en od. And we'll continue Bezrat Hashem.
Rabbi, tell me again, what sefer are you referencing here?
Sha'ar HaYichud veHaEmunah. This is from the Alter Rebbe.
Okay.
The gate.
It's part of Tanya.
Part of Tanya, yes. The second part.
The second part?
Correct. Okay.
Oh.
First part was Likutei Amarim, which is
Yeah, the
53 and the Beinoni, right, all of that. And this is the belief and unity of Hashem. יישר כוח.